Mike Vardy, thanks so much for being back with us. Year two of the Nonprofit Productivity Summit. We're really grateful.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
So let's start out by talking about time crafting, which is a phrase that I love, and you've been a huge proponent of it, an evangelist for it. You probably created the phrase. And I thought we'd start there because so many nonprofit leaders that I talk to, they say, look, I'm overwhelmed. I am carrying over stuff from my to-do list from Monday to Tuesday and Tuesday to Wednesday, and I'm really exhausted. And I'm just ping-ponging back and forth every day from email to Slack to meetings. I don't feel like I'm in control of my work. And so I thought, let's talk time crafting. What is it? And is it a tool that nonprofit leaders could use to maybe counteract some of that sense of I'm out of control?
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned control. You mentioned control of work, which I think is a key distinction than control of time. I think a lot of people get caught up in this idea of I want to manage my time. And I'm of the opinion, and I have been for a long time, that time is not something that you can manage because time moves on whether you want it to or not, right? So you could lead time to a degree, but again, I think that crafting it, and which is where the term time crafting came from, is a far more accurate way to go because conditions can change. The way, not just the conditions of your work environment, but the conditions that you have. Um, when I work with individuals, they have kids. All of a sudden, that changes the way time treats them and the way they treat time. So I think that time crafting, in its simplicity, its flexibility, and its sustainability, is a way. I call it you can call it a process or a philosophy, whichever way you want to go. I think it's a combination of both, to be honest. But it allows you to kind of look at time and say, I know time is going to happen. I know that, as we're having this conversation now, it's moving. So how do I craft it? How do I kind of sculpt it in the way that it's going to work for me? And the things that we should be managing are the things that live inside of time, right? Like processes and effort, attention, the cadence, like the pace that we work at, and even expectations, because those are more subjective, right? And so, and you can make them objective by having some, like if you have a process in place, it can be, okay, well, this is what our process is. And then how we each approach it can be very differently taken care of. So I think that things like, I can't get everything done today, my work is piling up, I'm overwhelmed. Things like adding themes to your days, your hours, that's an element of time crafting that can help with that. Because instead of saying, well, I'm just going to move everything to tomorrow, tomorrow doesn't become the default day anymore. Things like that. So, and then there's the idea of working by modality, right? Like, what mode do I need to be in to accomplish these tasks, as opposed to, let me just go through things sequentially, things like that. So yes, I think that the time crafting as an approach can be used to help you, kind of work with the directory that is your calendar, as well as the details of your days, which is the to-do list. And it can also live on top of existing philosophies and frameworks that you follow. If you're a getting things done person, you could use elements of time crafting with your work. If you are somebody who, uses, let's say, the Eisenhower matrix, again, very similar. Like, all of these things can be layered and used in conjunction with time crafting, which I love. I love the fact that you can use, the best parts of the Pomodoro technique with time crafting. I love the fact that you could say, hey, you know what? I want to have multiple lists, which is what getting things done kind of asks for. And I'm going to use time crafting with it. So yes, I think that it's definitely helpful. And the great thing about it is that, again, that simplicity, that flexibility, that sustainability, which, I think, and I believe, having worked in a charitable organization and a nonprofit before, you need to have that, because it makes you realize that time can be your ally instead of your enemy.
Mm. And for a lot of nonprofit leaders, one of the big problems is the work never ends. There's always another student to recruit to your school. There's always another mouth to feed. You could keep going. And so I think something like this, time crafting, could be really, really helpful. How about, Mike, let's say somebody adopts that mindset, that philosophy, that framework, and then they start practicing it, putting into place some of the things you talked about, such as theming days or whatever. After 3 weeks, 4 weeks, How are they going to feel? What's going to be different for them?
So they're going to feel more in command over their tasks. They're going to feel that time is working with them rather than against them. They're going to be able to say, I know where this stuff lands, when I should be working on this stuff. And if I get stuck, I have multiple lenses with which to use to look at the tasks that I have. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you adopt one themed day, which is what I don't recommend people do all 7 at once or 5 or whatever. Start with one. And when you do this, you should be working backwards from your certainties. So, for example, if you know that, let's say, no one is real, Friday is a fairly low key day at the office. Let's say people are, and generally it is. Okay, well, Friday is going to be, let's say we call it my administrative day. So it's the day where I catch up on all the administrative work that I need to do. Maybe it's maintenance. Maybe you call it that instead. What have you? So what happens then is whatever, it doesn't mean that you only do administrative work on Fridays. What it means is it's the default day. It's where, at the end of your day on Thursday, when you start Friday, you're like, well, I know that my overarching focus is going to be administrative work. That certainty is powerful because you now own it. You have ownership over it. And when people say to me, yeah, but there's no way I can theme my days. My days are too dynamic. I think people are getting very absolute about it. It's like, well, I must only do this stuff. That's not the case. There's going to be things that show up in your day that derail you from whatever your theme is. But here's the thing. When you're done it, you're not going to gravitate towards social media or email or any of these other things. You're going to go, wait, hold on. It's Friday. Friday's administrative day. What are the tasks that I've tagged or indicated are administrative tasks? And then you've got focus. You've filtered your focus. I'll give you another example. On Friday, you might be tired, right? So it's administrative day, but you're tired. Well, if you start using modes, which I talk about, which is mode-based living, the idea of a category of mode is energy. So if you're tired on Friday, your brain goes, it's Friday, it's administrative day, but I'm tired. What are my low energy administrative tasks? So then you've further filtered your focus. And you're using things that we all experience as humans, things that your brain will go, I'm tired. What can I do when I'm tired? There's nothing worse than not knowing that. But if you know that and you can see it, you've got evidence, then you can make forward progress. Same thing with between meetings. I've got 30 minutes between a meeting. What can I do? Well, hold on. What are my 5-minute tasks? Oh, here they are. There's 43 of them. I'll work through 5 of them. Oh, wait, it's administrative day. There's 10 of them. Let me work through 5 of the 10 administrative tasks. So it's just about filtering your focus. And to your point, 3, 6 months, it's not going to take hold overnight, but the more you practice it, like anything else, and that's why it's called crafting, you're not going to necessarily, a craft person never stops. A crafts person never goes, nope, well, that's it. I've mastered my craft. Time crafting ends when you no longer have time to craft, which means you have shuffled off this mortal coil. That's it. And that's the thing. There will always be more to do. So if you have a way to filter your focus towards that, the things that you want to do, the things that you need to do, it's going to make things feel better for you. You're going to have less instances of overchoice. Alvin Toffler talks about this in his book, Future Shock. You're going to have less overload because you're going to know, oh, well, this goes here and this goes here, and this is when I can do this kind of stuff. And you're going to feel less overwhelmed as a result. And so therefore, you're going to feel more in command of what's in front of you as opposed to out of control, which is not the way you want to be, because once that starts to show up, then you start to feel emotion takes over, right? So you want to have this reasoned approach to the stuff that you do. And time crafting for me and for, the thousands that have kind of jumped on that bandwagon, they feel the same way.
Sign me up for feeling more in command. I think that's something we all want. What's the exercise, Mike, that you walk clients through in terms of identifying those possible day themes for each day?
All right. So this is a great question. So first off, we don't always start with theming days. So I will always ask the person who I'm working with, whether it's a client or whether I'm working in a workshop with organizations, I will ask them, are you more of a calendar driven person or more of a to-do list driven person? And there's questions I ask that pull that out, whether I'm working in a one-on-one situation, which I don't do a lot of one-on-one coaching anymore. It tends to be more group oriented. But when I do any of that, They'll answer questions like, for example, if they put their tasks on a calendar, okay, they tend to be more calendar driven. But if their calendar is quite empty and they look at their to-do list a lot, they might be more to-do list driven. So once we find that out, then I will navigate them towards one of the two elements of time crafting, which is time theming or mode-based living. If they're more to-do list driven, I send them down the mode-based living path initially. If they're more calendar driven, I send them down the time theming path. Ultimately, what happens is those two they cross paths at some point and they become integrated through, whether it's modes, and they work through all 5 categories and they get to theme based modes. They're like, oh, well, my theme day is media day. That's when I focus on all my podcast making and video making and watching media and stuff like that. And then you might have a theme day that kind of coalesces with that as well. So if let's say they're a theme day person, so let's say they're more calendar driven, I will ask them to work through their certainties. So for example, uh, if they work from home, let's say, when are your kids home from school? Well, they're home on Saturday and Sunday. Okay, so that's a certainty. You know that. My wife, for example, she works from home a couple days a week, so that's a certainty. I also know that holidays tend to fall on Mondays or Fridays. So that's a certainty, which means the kids could be home on those days. So I kind of work this through like, those old school logic puzzles that are like, you know, Mike, Bill, Gary, and Joan went to the grocery store and bought apples, peaches, pears, and plums. By these clues, who bought what? Like, and through process of elimination, you get to figure out who bought what. Same thing with these theme days. So for me, Wednesday becomes my media day because never a holiday on a Wednesday. My wife doesn't work from home on a Wednesday. So I went from no Monday, no Friday, no Saturday, no Sunday to choose between Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I had choice, but I whittled it down to that one. So you could do the same thing. And again, Sundays for some people becomes family day or worship day by just virtue of the fact that that's what they already do. For some people, it's football day because they'll watch NFL. Same thing with Saturday. It's college football day, right? And so when people are, again, when they argue, oh, I can't theme a day, I often find that they are doing it to a degree. They just don't name it for every single instance that they do it. So then from there, they will add maybe more theme days based on their certainties. And that's kind of the way we do it. When it comes to modes, I kind of go through this. I use a sports metaphor for this in a lot of cases with people who get like baseball, for example. So you have their starting pitchers and your relieving pitchers, right? And you want your starting pitchers to get like 6 innings at least, right? 5, 6 innings. So I will ask someone, well, do you want to look at your tasks through the amount of time it will take you figure to do them, the resources that you need maybe to accomplish them, again, the energy that it will take to complete them, maybe the type of activity, which is fairly common because like I do a lot of writing. Okay, well, that's an activity. Or I researching or reading or fundraising or outreach is a form of activity. And then of course themes, which is the last category of, so it spells the word treat. Well, if somebody's like, I like to work by activity or I like to work by resource, that's my default. That's your starter. So you'll look at your resources primarily, but occasionally you're going to need your bullpen to get you out of a jam, right? They're not going to last the whole day. So, oh my gosh, I only have 30 minutes between meeting time to call in time as the reliever, or I feel sick today. I don't want to let everything pile up. Let me look at all the things I can do when I have low energy. Or you and I have talked about this before. I'm a night owl. You're not so much of a night owl, right? So for me, I will do my high energy stuff later in the day and low energy stuff earlier in the day. So it just, when I work with people this way, they, by having ownership and agency over whether it's a day that they've themed or, hey, I'm going to try to work primarily through the lens of resource or activity or whatever, but I know I've got these 2 relievers of time and energy in my back pocket. It just gives them a different way to work through their to-do list where they're not looking at the to-do list item first and foremost, because that's what overwhelms you. If you went through your list of tasks and saw all of them not grouped or batched in a way, that overwhelms you because you're going to look at it sequentially or by due date or what have you. But if you can group it by what are all the tasks I can do in Salesforce? Oh, here they all are. You're going to do all those tasks in Salesforce or as many as you want. And then you're going to leave Salesforce and move on to something else. And you can do this not just for the day either. You can do this within a project. You could do this within a role that you have. Like as a father or a mother or, maybe a mentor, right? So there's lots of different ways to do this, but this is the way our brains naturally operate. So all we're doing is leveraging that.
I'm so grateful you're back on the summit this year, Mike, because I feel like you're becoming like a philosopher of how people work. And it's really inspiring because you keep coming back to this. You have agency, you have the ability to make changes, you have the ability to go on offense, to use that sports metaphor. All right, Mike. So we've been talking time crafting kind of on the high level. Let's talk tools. And a lot of people in this year's summit, they want to know what are the tools people are using. And I know you're a big proponent. I mean, you use a lot of tools, and I know you're kind of tool agnostic, but you do have sort of this reputation of being an expert in ClickUp, an expert in Todoist, among other things. And there's probably a lot of nonprofit leaders who are also using some kind of a to-do list, if you will, and then they have to use some other resource, whether it's Asana or ClickUp or Basecamp or whatever. So I guess I have two questions. One, is that still your kind of dance in terms of those two tools? And how do they possibly work together?
Okay. So first off, um, you're right. I am tool agnostic because I believe that the app within is more important than the apps that you can purchase or use. I am still a big proponent of keeping your personal separate from your work, if only because the propensity for us to gravitate towards personal at work and vice versa is strong, especially in the remote work world that we're facing now, which is not going away. We're in a hybrid environment, right? And so to me, I believe a hybrid approach is what you want. Now, the hybrid approach doesn't have to be an app for home and an app for work. It could be a paper planner for home and an app for work. I highly doubt you would have a paper planner for work if you're because I mean, the demands are high and collaboration is really not possible on paper. So it's interesting. You said dance. I don't know if it's a dance or more of a like I go into one room and then the other. Do you know what I mean? Like I think it's because to me, I think that I'm very clear about Todoist is what I use personally. And if something from work works its way into there by default or by accident, I label it with ClickUp. So I create a label or a tag, depending on what you're using. But in Todoist, I think they're still called labels. They are called labels in Todoist. I would label it with ClickUp. So that way I know I need to move it into ClickUp. I don't even need to have a task that tells me that. If I see the label ClickUp, it's like, okay, I got to get this into ClickUp. Um, Conversely, and actually this isn't as much of a problem because getting things into ClickUp from like a mobile device isn't as frictionless
Yeah.
as it is with Todoist. So
Yeah.
I don't run into that problem very often. I have in the past, and I've really stopped doing this now that iOS has kind of gotten extensions in a much clearer way. I used to use drafts for iOS to kind of as a catch-all and then move things to where I wanted them. But I didn't really want to use that with my tasks. So I do keep those things separate. And yes, in ClickUp, I do have a tag called Todoist in the event that something gets in there that shouldn't be, right? So I do like to keep those things separate because when I'm at home, I'm at home. Like that's it. Like when I'm with my kids, I don't want to go into ClickUp and see stuff. And same thing when I'm at work. I don't want to go into and see personal stuff there because the pull of doing those things when I should be doing some deeper work on either side is very strong. So I would recommend, no matter what you use, and I know that Asana, for the longest time, I think they still do, they give you a personal project space when you sign up. That's a trap that I don't think you should fall into. Same thing with ClickUp. Same, like if you're using Todoist for work stuff and home stuff, I would recommend that you look elsewhere. And plus, by the way, by having your hands in two different areas, it creates very clear paths and definitions of, hey, I am at work. This is what I should be doing. Oh, this work one shut down. Well, we can just move that. You're not moving everything into a whole new place because that's friction in and of itself. I think the other thing that I do, and I recommend this, is if you are using like modes and theming, like all that stuff, you need to have a way in both of those tools to be able to observe them because time crafting isn't just about, okay, it's work or it's home. Like you want those themes to be universal. So if I have a media day, That's not just me doing podcast and video work. That's me watching the David Bowie documentary. That's me watching the Robert Downey Jr. documentary about his father on Netflix. Like that's what those are. So I have media as a label in Todoist and in ClickUp. So that way, when I move to Todoist after I'm done work, I'm like, okay, well, it's media day. What do I have to do in media that's personal? Same thing with administrative stuff. You have administrative or maintenance stuff or whatever you want to call it in life and at work. So have that tag or label in both. Same thing with modes. Like if there's 5-minute tasks for personal, there's 5-minute tasks for work. There's low energy tasks for personal. So you want to have those so that way the friction of moving between tools isn't as great. Because if you don't have that set up, then your brain's going to go, why don't I just keep this all in one place? The danger of keeping it all in one place. And I was listening to this uh, book, Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. And he said, no longer is it, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I actually was listening to the audiobook and I've since bought the paper version of the book because money and time are so closely related in a lot of ways. There's significant differences. But when it comes to work, it's no longer the office that is the place that we do the work. It's the day itself. So if you have everything in one place for the day, then you're going to be doing a lot of like segmentation and separating. It's better to have like physical shifts that you do because that's the way the brain works. That's the way we work. It'd be the equivalent of saying, well, I could wash all my dishes in the bathroom. You could. There's more places in the bathroom to wash dishes, in fact. But why would you? It's not the best place to do it.
Right.
And conversely, you could do the same thing. The kitchen, you could use the kitchen sink for certain things too that you probably should use the bathroom for, right? So like why? So I would have separate tools for those things because frankly, it's going to make your experience crafting time and making your way through life as a whole that much more pleasant.
That's great advice. All right, Mike Vardy. So when your week gets off track, it's, I don't know, midweek and it's just things have gone to the fan and you're just feeling beat up, and your plan is just off the rails. What do you do? How do you kind of refocus, say midweek when it's just been rough?
Well, the great thing is because I've been doing this for a long time, the theme days help me easily decide when certain things should happen. So if I don't get all my podcast stuff done on a Wednesday, the next default date is the Wednesday. So I don't panic. There will be things that may have to be done before, but that's fine because I'll just I might move them to Thursday, but they stand out. Like that's the thing too, is that if you're using time theming, the things that don't fit stand out. So it's like, wait, why am I didn't get this done yesterday. Oh, this is amplified as a result. So it kind of acts like the Eisenhower matrix would to a degree, but you're not having as many urgent and important things there because you've got landing places up to 7, I guess, if you want. And so when I think it's important to give ourselves grace in those instances too, because like you said earlier, and I mean, we're always going to have things to do. And often we present ourselves an unrealistic expectation of what we can accomplish in a day. There's that quote that's been attributed to a whole bunch of different people. We underestimate what we can do in 10 years, but we overestimate what we can do in a day. And I mean, there's a variant of that everywhere. So the nice thing about having themed days is that there's a natural default landing spot for those things that didn't get done on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I don't freak out as much when those things don't get done. The rest of the week, now that's the interesting part because now I have to break free of the idea that, okay, what didn't get done, some of this will have to get done this week. So I have to be willing to let go of the things that I would have liked to have done or wanted to do on Thursday, Friday, etc. And so that's kind of what happens. And I do, I mean, the biggest thing that I think helps me with this is journaling. Like I journal every night. It's part of my evening examination. Ryan Holiday talks about this and the idea of what the Stoics would do is they do like an evening examination. And I try to make it as frictionless as possible too. I dictate it into drafts. I copy and paste it into Reflection. I have which is an app that's cross-platform. I have photos that I can look at that kind of act as triggers if I don't know what to journal about. But by doing that, I'm able to course correct really far faster than if it was just a weekly review or a bi-weekly. And then at the end of the week, I just read the journal entries and go, okay, well, how'd the week go? What does this look like? What didn't it look like? So I never really freak out. Again, I'm my own boss, so I don't have to worry about it to the same degree as others. But it is nice to have natural landing spots or default landing spots for your tasks. And further to that, by using modes as kind of like the lens, it helps. Like at the end of the week, most people aren't going to be killing it with high energy tasks on a Friday. But we tend to just look at like, oh my gosh, the week I have to do all these things, breaking those things down into smaller particles, and then using energy as an indicator of what you should work on. That in and of itself might be the thing you need to do, right? Um, I think the other thing that you should do if you work in an organization that has a lot of external demands that you internalize is communicate. Hey, your boss gives you like 14 tasks for the week on top of the 12 that you had before. A quick email or a quick like, hey, which of these is the most important? Which is the one that you really want me to, or which of the like, and in some instances you're empowered to make those choices on your own. But if not, just asking, because their ego plays a huge role in here. They're not keeping track of what they've asked you to do. They're often just offloading, right? So if you bring it back to their attention, and that's what productivity is. Productivity isn't about, efficiency and effectiveness. Those are byproducts. Productivity is about intention plus attention, the active linking between those. So if your intention is, I got to get my week under control, how do you pay attention to that? Oh, well, I journal. Or, hey, I want to make sure that I'm doing right by my colleagues and I have all these things. How do I pay attention to that? Well, I'm going to whittle it down. I'm going to ask them, hey, what do we need to get done? Like, what's the most important thing for me to get done this week? And asking that question can be scary, but it'll also give you the answers. Some will be very overt. This is what you should do. Some will be there'll be subtext. They're all important. Do them all. Well, that tells you a couple things. Number one, your boss is probably overloaded. And secondly, you might want to start thinking about, looking elsewhere if that's the consistent demand that you're getting. So
Yeah.
nuance, and that's the thing is I was listening to a podcast not too long ago with Rich Roll and Terry Crews, the actor. And he said nuance, like we're losing nuance. And nuance matters because if we don't have that, then humanness comes out of all those things. We lose our ability to reason. Everything either becomes super emotional or super logical, and that's not balanced. And so you need to be able to when you face these situations, communication is such a huge component, and you need to check your ego at the door and be willing to be a little bit vulnerable and go, hey, you know what? I know these are all really key, but which ones I've got a lot on my plate. What would a successful week look like to you in terms of getting these done? And sometimes, and again, the nuance could be an email won't work, Mike. Like if I email them, that's going to get missed. So I'm going to go to talk to them. Or maybe the nuance is you arrange your email inbox in a way that allows you to see your boss's stuff standing out above all else, right? So there is nuance. We can't lose sight of that because, again, while we have objectives in our work, there's a subjective way in which we all approach these things.
I appreciate that emphasis on journaling too, because it kind of reminds us we're more than just the things we do.
Yep.
And also the things out there outside of us. Yes, they impact us, of course, and they make us sad or they help us to be excited or happy, whatever. We're more than just that. We're more.
Yeah. And Mike, a book I would recommend people pick up if they have if they're interested in seeing why journaling matters. It's a book called The Assassin's Cloak, and it's edited actually by Alan Taylor, and he recently edited the journal of Alan Rickman, the actor. And what The Assassin's Cloak is, it's an anthology of the world's greatest diarists. And when you see journals from people who met people that you only heard of through history, and you see like human interactions and just the mundane that they put in there, what the journal is the story of your life. If the calendar is the directory of your days and the to-do list is the details of them, then the journal is the story. Because you could have, like for us right now, we're having this conversation. It was in the calendar. Preparing for it was a task that we both had. But the story will be, hey, Mike and I had a great conversation. Really enjoy delivering the goods for him. And I'm really, really excited for what he brings to the nonprofit community. That's not going to show up in the calendar or in the
Mm,
to-do list, but it's going to
mhm,
show up in the story.
mhm.
And that matters because, and it doesn't have to be something you're going to publish either. I mean, we spend so much time on social media optically sharing our lives. And I'm using air quotes here because it's not, we don't share the stuff that we're afraid to let out there, to be vulnerable. And there's things that appear in my journal that when I'm gone, sure, publish it. Don't care. But I mean, there are some things in there that I know I wouldn't want anyone reading right now. But I also know a lot of people put things on social media that they probably shouldn't put on there that would be far better put in a journal. So, I mean, and it doesn't take a lot to do,
Yeah.
but it's so freeing. And I mean, we hear about the brain dump from David Allen and getting things done. Uh, I would posit that a brain journaling is a form of that because
Mhm.
you're letting go not of the tasks and the very logical reason things, but emotions can come out there that you're not going to get in those other two tools that we use that are so critical in crafting our time.
Mm. Yeah, it's freeing and it's free. So
Yeah,
there's that.
yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Mike, thanks so much just for being our guest, for sharing your wisdom and your insight and your expertise and your heart, really for just helping people understand work better. It really comes across. And I just feel like each year you're fine tuning it even more. So I want to thank you for that. And how can folks find out more about Productivityist and your podcast and the good work you're doing?
Well, the best thing you can do if you want to get started with time crafting right away is I have a time crafting starter kit. It's a 26-page PDF, but it'll give you everything you need to do to get started. It's at productivityist.com/kit. And when you pick it up, you'll get added to my email list. I mean, there's no secret there, but I offer a lot of great stuff in there, anywhere from 2 to 3 times per week, including my weekly attention emails, which I mean, and I appreciate you saying that, Mike, about like diving in deeper and getting more deliberate and intentional because the more time you spend in something the deeper you dig, right? And I put a lot of thought into the work that I do, especially over the past couple years. And I think that again, for lack of a better term, I mean, if I wanted to get like a BuzzFeedy headline, it's like time management is stupid. Here's what you should be managing instead, or productivity is fundamentally broken. Here's why, like those kind of things. But really, it breaks down to um, we need to be more thoughtful, more mindful. And when we start doing that, like better ways, come to us. And it was just a real pleasure to be able to share some of my thoughts and my insights with you and your audience that are here at the summit today. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Mike.